Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the indictment documents, or to indict the former president Donald Trump. Now, it's all over the news at the moment, so I just want to go through it, not syllable by syllable, but go through the overall gist of the indictment document that contains in it the so-called charges, and just see where we go from here. Now, I should add, I'll point out rather, I'm not a lawyer, but in a corporate law sense, I've prepared many legal documents and had to file them in court and had to appear in court as an advocate and a witness. So I have some knowledge of these matters. Or at least the law procedurally, and how evidence is to be brought before the court. Now, the standard of evidence that certainly in the cases I've been directly involved in, the standard of evidence is reasonably high. I mean, it's changing because everything's moving to an ideological law these days, and America's certainly at the cutting edge of that. And Alvin Bragg, the DA, is if anything, an activist legal practitioner. So, and very much caught up in the ideology of what law is meant to be. And we see this in Mr. Bragg's sort of thing where, if you're from a so-called marginalized ideological, victim points totem pole group, then the law is particularly lenient. Murder and robbery and bashings and attempted murder, that's all fine. Hey, you're from a marginalized group, you can do that. Whereas people from the non-marginalized groups, read straight white males, that they are held to a much higher level of accountability. So, as well as being ideologically on the hook for any interaction with a group that's deemed as marginalised. So we're talking about a very ideological DA, and if the way he talks and if the documents he puts together or approves are any indication, then he's definitely an affirmative action hire. It's a struggle to imagine that Mr. Bragg would have made it through junior high school in a merit-based system. Nonetheless, that's the reality that we have today. Now, the burden of proof and the quality of evidence you have to produce is fairly high. Now, I've been in, this is again more corporate law and contract law and so on. I've been in court cases where there's an allegation made and an assumption that, well, the intention of the other party might have been such and such, but there's no evidence to support it. There's only sort of very oblique evidence, allegations, hearsay. Somebody said that they heard somebody overheard that somebody said, this type of thing, and that's simply not admissible as evidence in any court of law where facts and evidence matter. So I've seen lawyers try it on in the past, just to see if they can slip it past the judge, but the judges won't have it. So no, you can make any claim you want, but you've got to have evidence to back it up, and I'm going to allow the other side to cross-examine that evidence. So you better make sure it's rock solid. And I've seen lawyers try, well, so and so might have intended to do this, and the judge, no, that's nonsense. I'm not even going to listen to that. I'm not accepting that as evidence, and so on. So the standard of evidence is high. Now, usually lawyers that have a very weak case, extremely weak case, will try that on. So it's the mark of a lawyer or a legal, in this case, a prosecutor with Mr. Bragg. It's the mark of a weak case. It's where, we actually got no case, so we kind of got to make it up. Mr. Smith was wearing his polka dotted tie, a necktie that day, and he usually wears that tie when he walks out on a Sunday to walk his dog. And when he walks that dog, that's usually when he does, and that's when, and so that means that his intention was, it's that level of weakness and that level of absurdity. And I'll come back to that sort of level of absurdity in arguments. They're not legal arguments; they're just bullshit arguments. But in ideological law, where the facts don't support the case that the prosecutors or the district attorneys or the lawyers in the court are trying to pursue, when the facts don't support it, then they have to go ideological and they have to say, well, he probably meant to do this. How do we know he meant it? Well, it's because he's bad, because he's a straight white male. That means he's a white supremacist. That means he's a fascist. That means he's a Nazi. That means he's Hitler. And so they use this escalating association and alleged enablement and the connection between it to try and argue a case. Now, in a court of, again, facts and evidence, that wouldn't wash. It wouldn't then get off the ground. But in ideological courts with ideological judges and activist people throughout the system, you can get away with that, or they're certainly trying to. And this indictment of President Trump is an example of that flim-flam bullshit type of ideological arguments. And now, I always took the view going to court that I had to nail down the evidence tight. I had to have the supporting documents so that when I'd go into court, I'd say, well, I allege this, and here's the email exchange between so and so. Here's the letter sent by so and so. Here's a diary record of the conversation between A and B, and this is where C and D were on this day when this happened, and this, and so on. So you nail it down tight. Now, when you nail things down that tight, you can see the lawyer on the other side start to, shit themselves. Holy crap! This guy's really nailed it. And that you have to have something called disclosure in the legal game, where you tell the other side what you've got, and the evidence you have, and the basics of your argument. Now, it doesn't mean you can't sort of embellish it a bit in the court, but again, you've got to get past an independent judge that's only interested in facts and evidence. And so, looking at the evidence, or when you bring evidence or create your case, rather, you have to say that to the other side. Now, I've won, or have been part of the group or the team that's won many cases because the other side looks at the evidence and they go, holy crap, we can't win this in court because our case is so weak. The judge is going to want to know why we came to court when we have such a weak case. And if we've got a weak case and we wasted the court's time, which that's what you've got to win, then we're going to have costs awarded against us. So the other side caves and goes, no, okay, we won't pursue this, and we'll pay your legal fees so far. So they can sling, $20,000 at you, and that's done. Whereas if they went through the whole court case, they'd lose and they'd be on the hook for $100,000, $150,000. So knowing that you've got a strong case or a weak case, as it might be, then that's I found that the extra time that certainly I and my colleagues put into nailing everything down tight and having fully documented a good solid trail of evidence, the other side would cave in. I mean, as an example, we were up against one case where it was a tight case where they were alleging intent, and there wasn't that much of a paper trail, but we had one email where the other side had claimed we've exhaustively examined such and such, and we've decided on so and so, and that was the clanger. That was when we sent that to the other side, the copy of it. That's what we had within hours. That they dropped the case and how much money do you want for your legal fees? So this idea of conclusive evidence, a very clear evidence, and a paper trail of evidence is key to winning a case. Now let's come to this thing. Firstly, the district attorney, when they were putting together the grand jury and the indictment, which is a balance of probability type concept, where they're not saying that you've actually broken the law, but you might have. and they're using that, I think, mischievously to bring about a nuisance lawsuit. But nonetheless, they didn't declare this to President Trump's legal team. Now, if they sort of come to, well, this is what we're looking at, and this would have been a genuine legal case. These are the areas of concern that so-and-so did this and wrote that, and here's the letter from such and such. And so they could have gone through, the lawyers could have argued, well, we're not going to, we don't agree with that, and we've actually got documentation to disprove that or to prove, the inaccuracy of your claim. So this sort of grand jury thing was developed to say, well, where a district attorney has very legitimate concerns over possible law breaking, and they want to investigate it further, and the grand jury becomes part of that, and they're pursuing it on the basis of a balance of probability. The assumption too is the grand jury is independent and impartial, which I would argue in New York, in this case, it's clearly not. Far from it. So this is something that could have been cleared up easily and administratively just with a few meetings with the district attorney, meeting with President Trump's lawyers, and the whole thing could have been finished. But that's not what they wanted. They wanted a media extravaganza and a feeding frenzy, and they wanted to use it to try and harass President Trump and to in some way restrict his political movement during his campaigning for the upcoming presidential election. So purely political. Now let's have a look at the document itself. Now, just looking at the way the wording of the document is, the very sort of vague, alleging, well, it could be, that might have meant, and and oh, well, it could be if this and if so and so, and if the sun rose in the east on that day, that could have meant that he did. I cannot find. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I cannot find a single actual, supportable allegation of criminality that contains with it any plausible evidence of any description. This is a document that's written by some fucking affirmative action two-bit flim-flam from first-year law college, who's affirmative action anyway. It's a very, in my opinion, a very sloppy document that contains within it not a single act of criminality or supportable act of criminality. So worst case, it's a low-level misdemeanor. Now, if that's the case, then and the statute of limitations has expired, which it has, then what is this case about? I can't see criminality in it. I can't see anything beyond low-level misdemeanors, and not even that I can't find. So that it seems to be, if I've understood it correctly, it seems to be that, well, Mr. Trump may have asked somebody to do this on the basis of a relationship that has not been proven and has been denied and is outside of the statute of limitations anyway. That may have been done with the intention possibly of, if the instruction was made to this person, and that may have been because if it was so, then that could have been if, holy fuck, that's the level that we're talking about here. I mean, talking about clutching at straws. I mean, this is beyond the pale. This is one of the most flagrant examples of abuse of the legal system to pursue a private citizen who has committed no crime. And this is what we should be talking here. Not about did President Trump not make a payment, or did not have an intimate relationship with somebody. That's not the issue. Here is the flagrant fucking abuse of the legal system. And the sloppiness, in my opinion, the sloppiness of this fucking indictment and the supporting reasoning that's in the document is a piss-weak example of children, ideological children playing playing with the legal system, thinking some sort of fucking toy that is theirs to play with, to just do what they want and run amok. And that's, of course, in the wider scheme of things, that's the way to undermine and humiliate and shame and degrade the Western rule of law or political democratic society. This is yet another undermining of our once great society by some two-bit fucking bum. So I can't see any illegality there, and the quality of it is poor. Now, is that a key issue? The poor quality of the in my opinion, the poor quality of the indictment and the wording and the structuring of the indictment. Well, in a proper court of law with an independent judge that was concerned about facts and evidence, that would get thrown out within. I mean, the second it would land on the judge's desk, it would be thrown out in a situation where facts and evidence mattered in an independent court of law. But we're not talking about that anymore. This is how subverted and corrupted our system has been. We're talking about activist judges, activist DAs, activist flunkies and goons and so on in the DAs and throughout the legal establishment. Activists who think they have a right to treat the law as their own personal instrument and a toy to go and get people they don't like. Remember, we're in an age where all you would do is say someone, you're transphobic, and that means that person has no legal rights. They are now at that point so evil, so beyond the pale evil that they have no legal rights and are entitled to no legal rights. I mean, this is absolutely monstrous. But there you go. So if you look at the cases that were brought against President Trump's policies, whether they be by presidential decree or anything, the policies that President Trump attempted to institute upon taking office in 2017, the activists would go shopping. The deep state activists would go judge shopping to find activist judges, and they would get stays or attempt to overturn. Now, I looked at because I was surprised how quickly they were able to get a court hearing, and they would have their documents sort of. The decree would come out on Friday morning. They would have their documents ready by Friday. They would be in front of a judge by Saturday or Sunday in an emergency hearing, and they would have a decision. Within almost at the same time they presented the documents. There was no time for a judge to examine that. So I managed to find some of those documents. This is the documents that were lodged by the activist lawyers. And again, it's the same style. It was, well, President Trump made a speech a year ago where he said that Mexican immigrants contained a number of rapists and murderers. That means, because he said that means he is a racist. And therefore, that means that any legislation, decrees or whatever that he passed, that must mean he did that from a place of racism and white supremacy. So therefore, that means that his decree was illegal because he might have been thinking this or so. And we're going to use something that he said in an applause line at a speech a year ago, 2 years ago, and we're going to say that meant that he was thinking and his intentions were. Now, no judge worth a piece of shit would even let that. That's not evidence. That's not fucking evidence. But in the world of activist ideological fanatics and flunkies, and remember, we're talking low IQ people here who believe that the whole American nation is evil and fascist anyway. So that's definitely what he meant. Hitler. And so the judge does a stay on it. Now, in the real world, that wouldn't happen. But this is the level of activism, and these documents were hastily, badly put together by, I would say, legal interns. That's the quality of it. A legal intern put them together, judge shopping for an activist judge, and they've got this strange, sort of twisted, perverse relationship between what somebody may have said, which may have indicated what they did or didn't intend, which may then ideologically mean this, which therefore enabled that, and this and that becomes evidence. That is fucking evidence in a court of law these days. So this is the standard of legal practice that's in the activist ideological circle. This is the standard now. So that Bragg indictment is the same standard as that they were using to go and spike Trump's legislation in the earlier days. In fact, throughout his presidency. Now, if you look at the carry on with lunatics like AOC and Mazie Hirono and fucking Ilhan Omar and those sort of people, they also have that juvenile, teenage girl sort of standard of understanding what the law means. And this is how it's used now. As long as you can get an activist judge and an activist DA, it seems you can get away with that stuff these days. But we need to be quite clear that in a proper court of law, where evidence and facts matter, President Trump is not guilty of anything at all. We need to really get our heads around that. You've been with Tacitus today on your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.